Hello everyone, and let me start by saying Happy New Year. And for those of you who might watch this much later, I'm recording this on 1st January 2018, and I decided I'm going to be productive on the first day of the new year. That doesn't really mean anything. I might not be productive for the rest of the year, but I kind of figured, okay, I'm going to be productive for the first day of the year, and I'll make a tutorial. And you can be productive by learning something new on the first day of the year. At least the ones of you who are not like hungover or sleep deprived from whatever revelries you were involved in last night. But for the rest of you, yeah, you can study a little bit on the first day of the new year. Okay, so I wanted to make the chair because I'd given that as an assignment, and some of you have sent me files. I sadly haven't looked at them. I will, but I kind of figured. But a few of you also asked in questions because you'd sort of gotten stuck in some places. So I figured I'll make a chair tutorial as well. And since we had covered a few things in the previous lesson, like groups and add, I'm making it a little more complicated. So what I have is we're going to take a look at how to make a normal chair, and then how also we can turn it into like a circle. That looks weird, but you can make those adjustments later. But just to have, like to change inputs and get a different result. So we'll take a look at how to make a more complex procedural object. Alright, so let's get started. So I'll just create a new file, and we'll start off by making a simple table. Okay, so I'm just going to take a piece of geometry, and let's delete this, and I'll create a grid. And let's start by making a basic grid of 1 by 1, and this I'll keep it to 2 by 2. Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm just going to take a line tool. Okay, and now what we had seen last time was when we try to do a copy, we do a copy to points, and because of the normals on the grid, the line comes in sort of lying down. So what we can do is we can take an add node, and if you delete the polygons, the normals sort of don't cause an issue anymore. So if you just do delete geometry but keep the points, you'll notice that the lines go back up again. So we'll do that. Okay, so let's take a transform in the middle for both of them. So this will be the line height, or let's call it the leg height. And let's take a transform here, and this will be my, let's call it base size. Okay, so this is the basic, and then we will take another transform. Let's call it size. Okay, so we can just make it slightly bigger. So I'll just press E and kind of make it. You can't see it. Hold on a second. Yeah, okay. So I'll make it about 1.1 in both X and Y. What you can do is, if you want it to be uniform size, you can copy this parameter and paste it here. But you don't always want it uniform size. So, like in a chair, you want it, right? Chairs are usually not stretched out, especially like if it's a single person thing, then it's squarish. So you can copy paste this here, but that's optional. Okay. And then we'll take a transform to move this up. So I'll take a transform here, and I'll take the leg height. So we'll do copy parameter and y-axis paste relative reference and merge these together. And that gives me my basic, table as what I had before. And then we'll put a poly extrude in the middle to give it some thickness. Yeah. Okay. So that's my basic table that I have. Okay. Now comes the second part, which is I want to create the back for this. Okay. So in order to create the back, I am going to split it from here itself. So we want to do like two things, right? So my basic, hold on a second, this is too big. So this is my basic, table with 4 legs. And what we want is something like this at the back and like this. So this is what we want to generate. So what I want to do is I want to generate, like these two things at the back and this, and then sort of move it back over here. So like the idea is to create it in the center and then also give it like a little bit of rotation so that we can tilt it and then have it move back to wherever we want it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the same 4 points that we have here. We had done grouping in the previous lesson. So we're going to group these 2 points, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move these to 0. So I'm going to like figure out a way to move these to 0 and then scale them down a little so they're in the middle, and we can copy like 2 lines on it. So that will become the the sticks for the back. Then we branch out the basic table, and maybe like that is my basic table, the basic grid, and then we can like squash it a little, and that will move to the height of these lines. Okay, so we take the whatever the height is and put it in a transform. So then this will move up here like that. And then finally, we will figure out a way to move this back to location. Now, the reason why I'm moving these in the front here is that it is more convenient to make everything at 0. Okay, if I don't move these back, these lines will be copied, at these points. But then this grid will have to be moved back. So and then the rotation becomes a problem because the rotation pivot usually comes at 0. Then we'll have to figure out a way to procedurally or mathematically move the pivot back here. So that will cause additional issues. So it is better if we can just move everything to 0, place everything here, and then push it back. So it's a little bit more work, but hopefully that will work out. And once we have done this much, like once our basic back is done, it will move up to the height of the legs plus the thickness of the table. Okay, so we're going to take this height plus this height. Okay, so these 2 heights will have to be added together. So we'll have to do a slightly longer channel reference in like 2 stages. So we'll have to do something like channel extrude height, or just height, plus channel leg height. So we'll have to like add those 2 together to get this to the right size, to the right height. Okay, so let's get started. So what I'm going to do is firstly I want the legs to have a different height for the back. So we'll take a second transform and we'll call it let's just call it stick height, HT. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to separate points from here. So we have these 4 points. You can switch on the point number so you can see them better. And what I want to do is let's say I want to take 1 and 3, or let's say if we take it this way, then we want like 0 and 1. Okay, so let's take 0 and 1. So we'll take a transform. Oh sorry, we're going to take a group first of all. So we'll take a group, and I'm going to create a group out of these 2 points, and we'll have 0 and 1. Make sure you change the group type to points, because by default it's kept to primitives. There are no primitives here, so you won't select anything. So make sure that this is kept to points. So we've done that much. I'll also delete whatever is not required. So I'll just take a blast and keep it to group 1 and say delete non-selected. So we'll have like 0 and 1. The next thing we want is I want this here, at the center line. So that's fairly simple. You can do it in 2 ways. I'm going to take the simplest method is you can just take a transform and in the Z axis scale it to 0, and that will work as well. If you want, there are a couple of like you can also do it through coding, like you can do it through Vex, but I'll cover that when we get to Vex. Like I don't want to do that right now. So we'll just call this move to 0. And let's also take a transform, because you want it to be like slightly inside. Like right now this is exactly like at the edges, so we want it slightly inside, so we're going to squash it a bit. So just press E and scale it down a little. So let's take it about 0.8. So we have done that much. Now I can take the back sticks that we have, take a copy to points, and just copy these two things. So there you go. So where they are right now is right in the middle. Okay, see, that's where they are. Okay, so this is done. That's done. Now we also want to create this thing, a table. Sorry, now we also want to create the back. Okay, so let's take a transform. I'll pick it up from the base size. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to press E and scale it down a little. And then we'll also take another, I'm keeping all the movements separate, just so that it's easier to know what we have. So let's call this as back size, and we'll call this as rotate 90 because it's supposed to rotate 90 degrees, and then we'll rotate it 90 in the x-axis. Okay. And then the last thing is this has to move up to this height. So take the back height here. We'll do right click, copy parameter, take a final transform, and in the y-axis paste relative reference. So there you go. And we can merge these together. So that's 1 and 2. And then I can take a poly extrude and give it some thickness, and also come down and turn on output back, because otherwise the back will be hollow. I think we might have to do that with the main table as well. Yeah, output back. Okay. So this is done. Like, we have the back, and we can take the whole thing and rotate it slightly after the merge. So I'll just, come in here. If you can't see the handle, just press enter. Come in the viewport, press enter. If you press escape, it will go back to navigation mode. So if you just press enter, it will come back, and just tilt it a little bit. Okay. And then we need to do a final merge, but before that we also need to move it up. So we have the back and this, and finally just take a transform again. And now, as I said, we'll have to do 2 channel references. So first pick up the leg height. So we'll do copy parameter. Let's call this move to top. Okay. And we'll come to the y-axis and do paste relative reference, and just select it, press Ctrl C. And then we still have to move it back. So I'll do that in a minute. But since I'm doing this, let me continue with this. Okay. And then we also want this height, the thickness of this. So come to the poly extrude. Let's call this something so we remember it. So call it table thickness, and take this distance value. So do copy parameter, come move to top, and then paste relative reference, and then do a plus and paste the previous one, and there you go. So now the final thing left is this has to be done before the merge, is we need to move it back. So what we do is we take these 2 points that we had. Where are the points? Yeah, 0 and 1. I want to take 1 point out of this, and or actually before the transform. So yeah, so these 2 points. Hold on, I'm going to move this out. If you want to detach it, just shake it so it detaches, and move it above that. Okay, so that it scales before we move it to 0. I want to take 1 point out of this, delete the second one, and move that in x-axis to 0. So just take a blast, branch it out from here, and we're going to delete either one. So we'll delete one, and yeah, usually it says guess from group. So since there are no polygons, it will automatically know that it has to be points. But otherwise, if you want, you can keep it to points. Either ways is fine. And then take a transform, and it's going to be the same move to 0. What we had done there was z-axis. Here we need to do x-axis. So just take the x scale and move it to 0. See, so that comes to 0. And then take another copy to points and move it back. So there you go. Okay, so if we, hold on, not there, this is the rotation, so this has to come beforehand. Yeah, so now if we merge everything together, see, so we have our basic, so this is the, let's call this back rotate. And so if I take this, see, so the advantage of this is like, since everything is at 0, it's easier to rotate. Otherwise, let's say we've already moved this on top, then the pivot will have to be placed in a location where you can then rotate it, and that will require a little more of, like, you'll have to type a few more variables to do that. This way, we don't need to do that. Okay, so what we've done is we first took, 2 points from here, moved those to 0 in the Z axis so we could copy the lines, and then we took like 1 point out of those 2 points, and just instead of moving them in the front, we moved it in the X axis to 0. So that maintains the back location, and then we can copy the entire back to that location. Okay, so the advantage of that is that if we adjust the size here, like the base size, then the whole table will, see, the whole table will automatically adjust. Yeah, this is a problem because the same base size is going into both places. So when I scale it down, you can see the back also scales, which is not bad actually. Like you might like that. We can also adjust the back size a little bit so it's wider. Okay, one more thing that we can do before I get to another point, which will be more complicated. Let me just take the table thickness. I want this slightly thicker. Is, as I had said in the previous lesson, you have some tools that can create groups automatically. So let's say if you want to bevel the tops, okay, like we have these and I want to give them a little bit of rounding or whatever, then we can take a look at that. Okay, so what we can do is, let's say I want to round these a little bit anyways, because this doesn't matter, like all the copying is done through the add. This is just for, the basic extrudes and, giving it thickness. So what I can do is I can take a poly bevel, and if I take a poly bevel on just, like this basic grid, and I can drop it in there, and it will bevel the corners. So if I just take the poly bevel, which by default goes to edges, so we'll keep it to points, and you can increase this, see, and you can keep the shape to round and give it some rounding so it looks nice. So then the table will look, a little bit rounder if we look at the final merge, see. And I can do the same thing here. Like I can take this, do Control C, Control V, and just drop it in there, anywhere. Should be fine. And then what I want to do is I want to like bevel the top. So what I can do is come to the table, come to the poly extrude, and you have this option down here, which says front group, which is this particular polygon. So I can create a group. Okay, so if I come in here and press information, you'll see that there is one primitive in the front group. Let's call it something small. I'll call it F. And then I can take another poly bevel, drop it in after the table thickness, select the F group, and we'll give it a little bit of beveling and a little bit of rounding. So yeah, so there you go. And we can do the same thing here. So we can take the poly extrude and do the same thing, just do extrude. Let's call it F as well. And I can take the poly bevel, do Control C, Control V, and drop it there. If you want it for both, like front and back, I can come in here and we can also create a group for the back. So we'll say F and B, and we'll do the same thing here. So let's do F and B. Okay, and come to poly bevel and just update that and type in B as well. So it'll do front and back. See, this is the nice thing about having groups and not doing manual selection, is that if you want to make additions to this, you can always go back and make additions. And the nice thing about this is not like, it doesn't care about the geometry count, which is the best thing about it. So if I come to the poly bevel and I increase the number of segments, you'll see nothing goes wrong, because it's just selecting the extruded front face automatically. Like the same thing here. If I come to this poly bevel and increase, nothing is going to go wrong. It'll still work. So Yeah, now here's the last thing. It looks a little rounded because that's a problem with the normals and the faceting. So what you can do is, as a final thing, I can take a facet, or you can take a normal. Just take a normal, and we can drop it somewhere. Okay, let's drop it here, and yeah, just lower it till it's okay. Yeah. So the problem why that one is starting to look weird is because this has normals and that doesn't. So as I had said, like sometimes if you have a mismatch between attributes, this will start giving warnings automatically. See, there's a warning sign here, there's a warning sign there. Let's do one thing. Let's do something simpler. Just take a facet. Drop a facet in here. What a facet allows you to do is it allows you to sort of for our purpose, we're right now going to do smoothing groups with it. So you can just come in here and you can do like cusp polygons to about 30 degrees. So if I just press Shift W, yeah. So what this is doing is it actually like detaches polygons. So it sees the angle that you have typed in here and it just detaches the polygons that are not connected together. So you can do this. This just doesn't generate normals. So because it's not generating normals, you're not getting a mismatch. Otherwise we can do it at the end. That's fine as well. Like if you come to the end here and I can just take a normal at this point. That way everything will get normals, and we'll keep it to 30 degrees. Yeah. So if we zoom out, yeah, I think that's fine. Come in here and do by face area. Yeah, see, there you go. That's better. So that looks a lot better than what was before. And then you give polywires to like this one and that one, you can give polywires. Okay, so this is the basic chair. Okay, and I'm hoping, I think I went slightly faster than normal because you know how to do the table. So I don't think this will be too complicated. It's just a question of knowing how to copy or where to copy these backlines, and then being able to move it back. So as long as you understand that, the rest of it is just minor additions. Like the poly extrude and the poly bevel stuff, that's just sort of like adding additional details. Even though it is useful, as I said, like you can make groups out of the poly extrude and feed that into the poly bevel so you don't run into any problems. Like you don't have to do like manual selections and stuff. So that makes life, easier. Okay, now that we've done this much, now let's make it slightly more complicated. So what I'm going to do is I just want to bypass these poly bevels because I know they're going to cause problems because I haven't figured that part out. Because I just added these right now. So I'm going to do a circular table or a circular chair, and I don't know how we'll be able to adjust the poly bevel into that. So I'm going to like temporarily bypass these. We'll worry about that later. Okay, so what I want to do is I want instead of a square, I want a circle. So what I can do is I'll start with a circle, and the idea will be that we take a circle and then we figure out a way to extract a square out of this. Okay, so the square will then feed into the add and become points, and the circle will just go into this place and that place. Okay, once we can figure out how to get a square out of it, the rest of it remains the same. So what we do is we take the circle and I'm going to change this to NURBS because it will be easier to extract like multiple resolution circles out of it. So the point is, if we can take a circle and bring it down to 4 points, then that becomes a square. So this is a NURBS curve. So like if we check it here, like if I do polygon and then if I bring this down to 4 sides, see, that gives me a square. But we want to do it on, like we want to have 2 branches coming out of it. Like one should remain a circle and then one should become a square. So I'm going to keep this to NURBS. And what you can do is, like, we'll keep this higher. Like this count does not matter. Okay, as long as it forms a circle, you're happy. Is you take something called a resample. So a resample is a nice way to increase or decrease number of points on a NURBS curve. So usually it's good to sort of smoothen out things. Like if you have hair curves, you can also use resample on that. But what it does is it has two options. One is it can increase points based on the length that you provided. So the lower the length is, the more the points will increase. And the other option is you can also do like precise number of segments. So when it says 10 segments, it's doing like exact 10 points. So if I bring this down to 4, there you go, you have a square. Now, before that, let's just put it in the ZX plane, so it's pointing this way. It has one issue which we'll have to take care of in the beginning, is the normals tend to face downwards. Okay, like if we check the normals on the C, they're facing downwards. For the grid, the normals are facing up. So, that's a problem. So let's take a look at, so firstly, we'll have to reverse the normals on this. So which is what you do is you take a reverse here. Because if you don't do this, when it feeds into the poly extrude, it will go in the opposite direction because the normals are pointing in the opposite direction. Okay, so this gives me the first piece of the puzzle. The only thing now we need to change is because this is, it will come in at 45 degrees. Okay, because when it extracts from it, like it's not going to form like a square. It will take like 4 points like these, and it'll extract like a diamond. So if you rotate the diamond to 45 degrees, you'll get that. So we'll take a transform and we'll rotate it to 45 degrees in the y-axis. And there you go, that gives me a square. We're not going to worry about sizes because hopefully we haven't done anything that will cause problems because of the size. Okay, so now comes the big part, which is we need to figure out a way by which we can switch the inputs. So we can have a square or we can have a circle. Okay, so the way it works is you get something called as a switch, and it has to go into two places, right? So it has to come into like these two, which is just the basic back and the top, the flat where you're going to sit, and then it has to come into the add. Okay, so just take something called a switch, and if we just plug this into the switch, okay, and you're going to see like it switches between the basic grid. Like let's bring in the circle just to show you. Okay, like you'll see that it switches between these two things. So what we want is we want two different switches, right? Like the first one, one is just the 4 points which will go into the add, and then the other one will be like the smooth circle which will go into the seat and the back. Okay, so this is the 4 points. This will come in here, and then we are going to take these two things. We'll do Control-C, Control-V. This resample goes back to, we'll keep it to like maximum segments and just increase it a bit. And we'll do Control-C, Control-V. Okay, press Y and this comes in here. So this is the base circle. Okay, this is that. And this is, for the points. So this comes in here and we'll do a copy paste. So let's take a copy here, copy parameter, and it'll feed into this one as well. So that if I change one of these, they both will change. And these come into this place. Now, if I have done everything right, nothing should go wrong. And I'm hoping I've done everything right. So if I just come in here to the final output, and if we take a look at this, and if I take the switch value and change it, there you go. It's weird, it's really big. Okay, maybe we should reduce the size of yeah, there you go. So if I switch this, say we have a table and we have a circular. Now let's try to bring back the poly bevel and see what we get. So if I take this to circle, the poly bevel is going to be like, we have quite a few points. So let's do one thing. Let's take the resample and increase the number of points. Hopefully the bevel will make it round anyways. So let's just take the poly bevel. Yeah, I think that holds up. That's not bad. We're getting like Yeah, it's still kind of faceted, but yeah, that's why I said, like we'll have to jump around a little bit more. Like maybe you'll have to do like a poly bevel at this point, which we can do actually, like that doesn't matter. Yeah, okay, hold on a second. Let's try this, right? I'm going to delete the poly bevel. I'm going to take this out and put it before the switch. So this automatically bevels and comes in because the point count does not matter here, right? And then this resample can be smoother. Yeah. So hopefully, like if we just come to the switch and we switch back, see that's rounded and this is fine. So the poly bevel should come in, at base level itself where we round it beforehand. So the switch node is actually very nice. Like when you want to, if you are going to generate like a really complex procedural object that has multiple inputs and stuff, then the switch node is really cool, right? So like when we did the staircase and you want to have like multiple types of railings, like maybe you want to give options of having rounded rods or maybe square ones or something like that, then you can have like switches. You can have like first input is rounded rod, second input is square ones, third input could be like a little more fancy. So you can generate multiple things and feed them in through a switch node and be able to switch between those. So one of the reasons I kind of realized that I should do the chair is because I could cover a few more topics. So primarily being like a lot of stuff here is the same. Like there's nothing too new. We figured out we've done groups previously. We saw another usage of groups. Also, we saw how to generate groups automatically from the poly extrude and then feed them into a poly bevel. So we could do this kind of rounding. And the switch is the important thing, right? We figure out how to do switches and also how to do, how to have multiple channel references. Like when we needed to move this on top, so we did like the table thickness plus the leg height, so we got to do both those things. And now as a final thing, we'll just add the poly wire. Okay, so just like turn off, do vertex textures. Now, here's something interesting. Like every time I have to turn this off, right? Every time I have to come in here and turn off, do vertex textures. If you want it to be off by default, once you've turned it off, don't make any changes to any of the parameters. Click on the gear and say save as permanent defaults. So once this is done now, if I make a poly wire again, it'll always be off. Okay, so it just makes life easier. So come in here, we'll lower this, increase the sides. Let's make it 40 sides. Yeah. And we do the same thing there, like Control C, Control V after the copy to points. Yeah, there you go. So there it is. This is slightly inside, which is fine. Maybe if you want, you can move it, slightly to the front based on the poly wire thickness, which would be here. Yeah, it moves up and then maybe you want to move it in the Z axis. Let's see if we can do this, right? So I'll do a right click, copy parameter. Let's come to the transform and Z axis, paste relative reference. Yeah, there you go. See. So now as the thickness varies, you'll see that always sort of sticks on top. So that's pretty cool. So we can rotate this as much as we want, which is fine. And we can have a square or, a circle. And the transform here is what allows me to sort of move it, front and back. See, you can have it inside, you can move it a little bit more inside. Like this can be, we'll call this as the back position. Yeah. Like if you push it too far, then it's going to go out. So don't push it too far. Okay. But yeah, don't push it over 1. Like one is your limit. You don't want to go over that. Because once it crosses 1, it will move out of the boundary of this. And yeah, I just want to increase the overall size of this. Yeah, let's make it 1.25 in both. Yeah. and maybe take the, yeah, it's not bad looking. We can adjust the stick height a little bit. Yeah, okay, so there you go. So much more complicated than what was before. So for those of you who managed to figure it out, great. I still have, as I said, I'm sorry I still haven't seen the files. But I'm hoping you, like, I covered a few more things so you get like a few more ideas of what you can do with it. But yeah, I will check out your files today and get back to you. Okay, so once again, Happy New Year, and I hope, as usual, this particular tutorial was useful. And if you have any questions, regarding this, all the usual stuff, blah blah blah, you can ask me questions wherever. Send me owls. That was a Harry Potter joke. Okay, so yeah. Anyways, the point is I don't even drink, and I'm still this crazy. But yeah, so. Anyways, I hope this lesson was clear. If you have any problems regarding this or anything else in general, you can write me an email, send me a message on YouTube or Vimeo, whatever is convenient to you. And that's basically it. So in the next lesson, before that's basically it, we will start with attributes. So that is very important. Attributes is like a huge part of Houdini. So we'll start with attributes in the next lesson. And that's basically it.